So we at Nectar talk a ton about trust, and our leadership team has given us various resources that they really enjoy reading about trust to help us kind of formulate our opinions of trust and how we think about it, and then how we utilize it in the workplace. So one of the things that was recommended to us actually through the Nectar platform in the challenges section was reading the book called Trust Factor. So one of the challenges we could do for Nectar points was to read this book. And so I read the book. It's by Paul Zak. It was one of the best books I have ever read. And it goes so deep onto like company culture, organizational culture, and how much trust plays a role in that. And then on top of that, we were reading this article about the neuroscience of trust, also written by Paul Zak. And I feel like my favorite part of it was talking about how trust creates joy. And it was so cool because I never think about joy as a metric that you can measure when you're talking about, employee engagement, company culture. It seems to be like more hard and fast metrics. But they said that you can measure this by simply asking, how much do you enjoy your job on a typical day? And they have done all these studies about how purpose-driven work with a trusted team is how joy on the job happens. So that was my favorite part, learning about how trust creates joy. And I love reading articles and books like this. We're just really solidifying our point of view on trust and strengthening that. So I'm going to hand it off to Trevor, who kind of starts all this at the top as our CEO. What kind of stood out to you about the Neuroscience of Trust article?
Yeah, so in this article, Paul Zak, he's a neuroscientist that specializes in organizational behavior. He's actually been somewhat of a mentor for us as well in the past. One thing that he says here, and I quote him, says, "In my research, I've found that building a culture of trust is what makes a meaningful difference. Employees in high trust organizations are more productive, have more energy at work, collaborate better with their colleagues, and stay with their employers longer than people working at low trust companies. They also suffer less chronic stress and are happier with their lives, and these factors fuel stronger performance." And then a few statistics that he goes on to list from his research says, let's see, compared with people at low trust companies, people at high trust companies report 74% less stress, 106% more energy at work, 50% higher productivity, 13% fewer sick days, 76% more engagement, 29% more satisfaction with their lives, and 40% less burnout. I know that was like a fire hose of information and tons of stats and percentages, but in a nutshell, just shows that these high trust companies that really build a culture around trust, there's so many benefits to doing it. And it seems fuzzy and hard to connect to like trust to like economics, but that's exactly what Paul Zak has done in his research. Is he tries to really break things down into like the core principles and prove how something so abstract as trust actually can drive like economic production and value.
I can just jump in for a second. I had some quick thoughts. It's pretty crazy, actually, Trevor, from those numbers that you were talking about of the things, the results that Paul Zak saw from companies with high trust. We're talking about stress and energy and productivity and engagement. These are all like things that are top of mind for companies of how do we get more engagement? How do we get less burnout? How do we have more employee satisfaction and reduce stress and have higher productivity? It's crazy that trust is one of the underlying factors that directly impacts all of these. And so a lot of what Paul Zak talks about is if trust is the underlying factor that connects all of these together and improves, the engagement and productivity and happiness and energy, then what are the things within trust that build up trust that you can have in teams and departments that actually like move the needle? And the two things he said that companies score the lowest in when it comes to trust are recognition and transparency. And he says that if you can just improve those two things, then you can have a high impact in improving the trust in your organization. And as a result, improving your productivity, improving your engagement, having less burnout. So it's pretty wild that just focusing in on trust and even more specifically on recognition and transparency, you can move the needle so much at your company. I thought that was cool.
It's wild too, because being in the software space, everyone's like, what's the ROI? What's the return on investment? Like, that's all these buyers' number one concern. How do I bring this to leadership and prove the ROI? But Paul Zak is like, there's a return on trust. Like, you don't even have to invest anything right away. You just have to invest this trust in your employees, and you're going to see a return on that. And then you can build on that with, like you said, Peyton, some of these other ways of recognition and increasing transparency, increasing empathy, and working on some of these softer skills for an actual economic return that can be quantified.
Yeah, another thing that I really like that he kind of alludes to here is just how like culture's typically designed in a very ad hoc, kind of non-deliberate way with a bunch of random perks. I think he mentioned like karaoke Fridays and gourmet meals and stuff. But he said, despite the evidence that you can't buy higher job satisfaction, organizations still use golden handcuffs to keep employees in place. And I love that part. You can't buy higher job satisfaction. And that's what tends to happen with these things, like these really ambiguous principles, like trying to build a culture on trust and connection and recognition. Like it can be hard to know where to start, and you can't just like throw money at it typically. So you end up going this ad hoc way and you try to buy higher satisfaction when really you have to like take a few steps back and be very deliberate about how you develop a culture, how you engineer a culture that is employee centric, that has a high level of trust, and will ultimately drive the outcomes that you're looking for.
Do you have any thoughts, Trevor, on like why is it that trust was such an important thing for you? Like as the CEO starting out with Nectar, I feel like ever since I came on, even like the very early days, trust was like a very big initiative for you as far as like how you wanted to build a culture. Why is it like that?
You know, like most people, that's a great question. Like most people, I've been in situations where I've both felt trusted and empowered to do something, or I've felt micromanaged and not trusted. And it's like a night and day difference as far as my ability to deliver and like the outcomes that I'm able to create. And so just from lived experience, I feel like if I feel that way, I want to build a place where everyone can feel that they're trusted and empowered. But not only that, it's like I'm not good at everything, right? And the people that we bring on to the team at Nectar, I believe are a lot smarter and more talented than me, especially in kind of their specific roles and their domains. And so I want to make sure that they have the latitude and the trust to go out and do their best work the best way that they know how. And it's really hard to build a team when you're constantly worried about how everyone's doing it and making sure they're doing things like this exact way that you want to. Honestly, like selfishly, that'd be a really hard job to constantly manage. And I don't think it's very scalable and it'd be really stressful. And so in my mind, it's like, how can we hire and bring on like the best people and the right people for a role and set the direction, give them maybe some guiding principles, but then get out of their way and allow them to do their thing.
Yeah, it's wild you said like the night and day difference between micromanagement and trust, because I came from a place of being micromanaged, and I'm already a type A person as it is. So I put a lot of pressure on myself. And when I was being micromanaged, when I showed up in meetings or I showed up to present my work or I showed up to share something, I was coming with an anxious presence and I was living with this fear. And even when I'd log off the call, I was fearful. I was fearful that they were going to think that I wasn't doing enough or that I was going to get fired. I was just like fearful of the next thing. And my heart rate was up. Like I was anxious just doing my work. So I wasn't able to show up doing my best work. Come to Nectar and I'm trusted and people get out of my way so I can do my work. And so when I come to share my work or my ideas or my thoughts or my questions, I'm like met with this optimism and I can show up with a calmer and more confident presence now because I'm given the tools before that point. So it's been, like you said, night and day, and it's really empowering.
And something that is interesting to me especially from, Paul Zak studies and all of the research that's been done, is that increasing trust in your organization and increasing empathy and recognition and all of these important pieces of culture, they all impact the bottom line. They help innovation and productivity and ultimately help you get more revenue more efficiently. It's interesting to me that so many companies still don't focus on these things or don't make changes in order to improve them. I know that, like Paul Zak mentions in here, that 55% of CEOs think that a lack of trust is a threat to their organization's growth, but most have done little to increase trust, mainly because they aren't sure where to start. Trevor, does that sound like that's like the biggest reason from what you've seen? Is it just that people don't know where to start, or like what are the reasons why people don't make like the changes necessary to be able to increase trust and better the culture?
Yeah, I think when you hear, as a leader, when you hear like, hey, I need to increase trust in my organization, like it's really, really hard to know what that means and where to start. And I think it's something that like most leaders would agree with, like, yes, I should have more trust in my organization, but maybe understanding the why it's important is necessary, but also like, okay, how do I action that? Like, how do I go out and make that happen? And a few kind of pointers that Paul Zak has had in his studies is the first one he mentioned, which we found really interesting, at least myself, was to recognize excellence. Anytime you see somebody doing something, whether they're living a core value, they're going above and beyond kind of the call of duty, he says that you need to recognize them quickly. So don't wait a week, don't wait 2 weeks, do it right then, do it in a public way so that everyone else can see what excellence looks like, and it kind of raises the bar across the organization. And to make sure that it's like unexpected too. You don't want them to like expect something every time they do their job or they go above and beyond, right? You want them to do it for the purpose of helping the team, but making sure that you notice that and highlight that is really important. So that's kind of the recognition piece is one area you can build a lot of trust in the organization. He mentions inducing what he calls challenge stress, and that's basically assigning a team a difficult but achievable job, right? Like stress, we shouldn't avoid stress altogether. There's good types of stress and bad types of stress, but it's really aligning your team and your company around a common goal that 70% excites you and 30% scares you. And that really gets everyone excited to focus on achieving something together and progressing towards a common goal. Another one was like giving people autonomy, right? That one seems the most obvious to me when it comes to trust, is like, don't micromanage them, give them the tools and the resources they need, but then get out of their way and let them execute, and, check in with them regularly to make sure that they don't have any type of blockers or anything like that. Another one was to share information broadly. So I think of transparency with this, especially in uncertain economic times that we're in right now. I'm in shock. I talk to friends all the time and they have no idea like where their company is at from like a health perspective. Like they don't know how much revenue they have. They don't know how much runway they have, how much money they're burning, how much money they've even raised in the past. And so they have no clear picture because these metrics aren't shared with them. And that can definitely cause a lot of stress and uncertainty. And I know it would for me, and I know it is for a lot of the friends that I've been talking to. So being really transparent with everyone on how the business is doing and what are the metrics that we're chasing kind of together is a really good way to establish trust. So it's not just this hush hush thing that only, the leadership team has access to. Another one was like facilitating personal growth and professional growth. For us, we call that elevation. As far as like internally, we have our create framework around culture, and the last E is for elevation. And how do we develop our people? How do we help them grow? How can we create like clear promotional paths for everyone, and then give them other types of resources to go out and become better and to upskill? So, and the last one here was being intentional about building relationships. So how can we drive connection within an organization, make sure that people are not just friendly, but they're becoming friends, right? They're laughing with each other. They know like how their spouse is doing or their family. Just really getting to know people is a big part of building trust within an organization because we are social creatures. So anyways, that's kind of in a nutshell. Those are like a few key points worth calling out as far as like how can we actually go out and build trust. There is like a pathway to doing it. We just need to break down what trust means and how we can, start implementing these different elements of trust throughout the organization.